right, is everybody good?
Yes.
Everybody all right? I don't think we should be complaining much. All right, welcome to our keynote speaker with lunch today. We try to switch up FDI a little bit. Got to keep our relationship new, people. That's what we got to do. Dr. Tara Rose is here to speak to us on assessment. I met Dr. Rose vicariously through some work that I was doing. I wasn't doing any work. I was going to CPE and learning things in the teaching and learning kind of work group that they had. And one of the biggest stresses for putting this on for me is to obtain a keynote speaker. Number one, they're not a dime a dozen. You know, and number two, you have in your mind a theme, and the administration kind of focuses you on maybe what the next year's focus should be. And so not only are they not out there in abundance, but now we're limited to topic selection. And so I went to Pedagogicon, and I had some faculty members attend it with me, and I came across Tara in the hallway, and I knew she's the assessment guru, and I knew that we were doing assessment for FDI, and I was like, do you know anybody? And she was like, I'll do it. And I was like, oh. So, with that being said, again, she's got a wealth of experience in the area of assessment, and I know there's going to be things that we are all going to learn from her. I even have my notebook next to my plate with food because I'm ready. After working for CPE, Tara has now moved to Louisiana to work for LSU. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty jealous of that area. Like, that's a beautiful place to be. Where she will be the director of assessment for Louisiana State University. So I am beyond thrilled and honored to introduce Dr. Tara Rose for our keynote address today.
Is your food good? It smells really good. Did y'all save me? A little bit?
A little bit.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm excited to be here today. Thank you, Ellen. We worked together over the past year at CPE. Prior to CPE, I was at the University of Kentucky as their director of assessment for about 10 years. And then went to the state level for a year. And then LSU snagged me. So I've already made the move. I moved about 2 weeks ago to LSU. I wasn't supposed to move until the end of August. And then something happened, the timeline changed. I had to move the first weekend in August. But I had already made a promise and a commitment to you all. So I flew back this weekend, and I'm here with you all today. So I will fly out as soon as I get today. But I'm excited to be here, and plus it gave me an opportunity to see my husband and son, who are staying here until the house sells. So I'm hanging out in Louisiana with my dog. Okay, so you all are here today to learn about assessment. I'm very excited to be here. Tell me a little bit about what you all have learned in the past day and a half. Anything exciting?
Somebody better speak.
Come on, you all have been here for a day and a half already. What have you all learned? Tell me something new. Anybody?
We talked about program SLOs and course SLOs.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about core student learning outcomes and program student learning outcomes. All right, anything else?
You have two departments, one who has recently completed accreditation and did a phenomenal job, and another who is going up in the fall of 2018.
Okay, so when you say, so tell me a little bit more about that.
National Foundation Pre-K.
Okay, so education.
And then nursing.
And then nursing. Okay, fantastic. And we are all three schools represented here today? Mm-hmm. Arts and sciences, health sciences, business, equine, sports, so a little bit of everything. Okay. Do we have any administrators? All faculty? Charles. Administrators over here? You're the silo over here. Faculty, administrators.
We don't
okay.
integrate.
Okay. Fantastic. Anything else you all learned? Program review, did y'all do some program review stuff? Yet? Have y'all done that yet? Yeah? Okay.
This year.
Do what?
We're starting it this year.
Starting program review, okay. Does everybody do program review at the same time? No, different schedule. Okay. Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about achieving momentum in student learning. It's kind of hard to achieve momentum. You kind of do it. It happens. Maybe you're doing it for accreditation. Maybe you're doing it because of program review. But sometimes it's hard and it can be frustrating to keep that momentum going, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the importance of assessment, why it's important to you, why it should be important to faculty, why it's important to students, why it's important to the university. All right? Where do I need to point this? I don't know. Is it on? Yeah,
It should be, but let me see. I wonder if the battery died. They have. Whoopsie
What
daisy.
kind of batteries?
It's technology.
A single AAA.
All right. Roll on, I'll move it.
So, and I will tell you that I love assessment. Assessment is my passion. Technology, not so much. Okay. Is it like what? Does this work? Okay.
Here we go. It just needed focus. Poor Ellen.
You just need it to.
Yeah, it just needed focus on the PowerPoint. There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm using over here. Okay. So I'm going to start off with some assessment quotes. Okay. The first, if you don't know where you're headed, you'll probably end up someplace else. And these are just assessment quotes that I've heard over time. I just want to share 3 with you. The next one, we plan, we develop, we deliver, we assess and we evaluate the results of assessment, we revise, we deliver the revised material, and assess and evaluate again. Perfection is always just out of reach, but continually striving for perfection contributes to keeping both our instruction fresh and our interest in teaching paid. I really like that one. And another, if we always do what we've always done, we will get what we've always got, right? Can you all relate to some of these quotes? Which one can you relate to more?
Go to the bottom.
Or the bottom? Okay. So discussion 1, what are the characteristics of program assessment for learning? And I know you all are eating, but try to eat and talk at the same time. I want this, we're going to do a little challenge here, right? How many of you all can eat and talk at the same time? Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of program assessment for learning? Anybody? Somebody mentioned student learning outcomes earlier, right? So the target or student learning outcomes, right? What are some other characteristics?
Well, the data have to be relevant and informative if what you're looking at is continuous improvement.
Fantastic.
So you need the right data to ask the right questions.
So we need evidence, right? We need evidence, data. And what are some of, does anybody give me some examples of what that evidence is? What could that evidence look like? Okay, grades, papers, projects, tests, surveys, right?
Discussion board postings.
Discussion board postings. How many of you all teach online? Face-to-face? Both? Okay, so a little bit of everything. What are some other characteristics? We need to analyze and interpret the data in order to make meaning of it, right? And then you had mentioned continuous improvement. The goal of assessment is to continually improve your program, right? So what's working? What's working at your course, program, or university level? What's working? What's going well in terms of assessment for learning? I know.
We've been able to use our data to improve courses and program.
Okay, so the ability to use the data to actually improve pedagogy or the curriculum within the course, okay?
Also, looking at assessments that we have that everyone takes and seeing where holes are.
Okay, so what are some of those assessments?
We have like the practice.
Okay,
We also do more of a presentation for our checkpoints, our gates. So assessing the 10 teacher standards,
okay,
and if the students, from what our courses have provided them with and their performance in field placement and so on, that we use that information to say, okay, if we have these holes in this area, let's find the course.
okay. That's actually supposed to be teaching those concepts. Okay, great. Anything else? What else is working well?
We use a systematic plan for evaluation for our program,
Okay.
where we can document our data.
Mhm. So intentional, so you're a little more intentional in your planning efforts? All right. Anybody else? What's not working?
Your pointer.
My pointer is not working well. What's not working? What are some things that aren't working? Anybody? I know everything can't be perfect. Something's not working, right? So let's talk about what's not working.
Sometimes you have difficulty finding the time to really, do a really thorough evaluation.
Right? Time, resources. Anything else?
Getting consistent information from adjuncts and from the different formats that the classes are offered.
That's great. Consistent information across sections of the course. Okay. Anything else?
And sometimes clarification is about who's looking for what.
Okay. What's needed? Who does it go to? All right. Communication and clarification. Anything else?
I think identifying the student needs.
Okay, so what are those student needs? What do the students need? What do they know, right? What do they not know? And what are their needs?
And how
Right.
can we differentiate within our
Fantastic.
courses?
Okay?
If you ask them, all say, I need an A.
I just want an A. How do I get an A? Right? And then what is your all's response?
Why can't I get it?
Read the syllabus. Right? Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about what's working, what's not working. And I'm going to go into a little bit of the foundations for assessment, okay? So let's talk about the basics. AAHE, many of you all may not be familiar with that, but that was an organization, gosh, probably in the 1990s. It's been around, it was around for a while, but it actually disbanded, probably in the late 1990s. It didn't last long. But what really came out of that organization were the 9 principles of assessment. Okay, how many of you all have seen these? Anybody? Currently today, AALHE, I don't know if you're all familiar with that organization, but it's the Assessment for Learning in Higher Education. I was actually president of that association back in 15, 16. And we are currently now, the board is actually working on revising some of these principles for today. All right, but these principles still hold true. The first, assessment of student learning begins with educational values. How many would you all agree with that? Absolutely. Most effective when it reflects on understanding of learning, that it's integrated and revealed performance over time. So value added of our programs, value added of our courses, right? Value added of the students' time, educational journey while they're here. Assessment works best when the program it seeks to improve have clear, explicitly stated outcomes or purposes, right? Assessment requires attention to outcomes, but also equally to the experiences that lead to those outcomes. So looking at those co-curricular type activities that students are doing, right? They need both curricular and co-curricular for their time here, How many of you all are involved in any co-curricular? Anybody? Yeah, 1, 2, okay. Assessment works best when it's ongoing and not sporadic, right? It needs to be continuously ongoing and systematic, right? Assessment fosters wider improvement when representatives from across the educational community are involved. What happens when only the chair or one faculty member creates the outcomes for the program or for the degree program?
It may not be relevant.
They may not be relevant, right? The idea, yeah,
One is dimensional.
right? Anything else?
There's not uniformity in how things are taught, like my perspective of what that means is necessarily the same as my colleagues, so therefore what we instructors.
Right, and the goal is to bring faculty together, right, and try to come to some sort of consensus, right? Bringing faculty, and it increases faculty engagement when you do that, right? You all work together, you have conversations. We all have different viewpoints, we all have bias, we all are experts in our own way, right? But the idea is for faculty of a degree program to come together and talk about that and finally come to a consensus. Assessment makes a difference when it begins with issues of use and illuminates the questions that people really care about, right? What is it that your degree or your discipline cares about? What do students need to know about that field, right? Most likely to lead to improvement when it is part of a larger set of conditions that promote change. And then the last principle is through assessment, educators meet responsibilities to students and to the public. Right? So when you admit a student into Midway University, you are making a promise to that student. You're making a promise to the families of that student, right? To get them in, to get them in and to get them out with that degree in their hand, okay? So there are 4 types of levels of assessment. Institutional assessment, that's very broad. Right? Types of institutional assessment could be standardized testing if you're looking at or you're sampling all students. So possibly the collegiate learning assessment. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. The CAP standardized exams. Some of those standardized exams, there's like a critical thinking exam, maybe something from ETS. Those types of assessments can be done at the institutional level. Do you all do anything at the institutional level here?
We're going to start using the sales test for.
The what?
For information review.
Okay,
So that'll be institutional level.
fantastic.
Rather than, you know, across all the employees.
Okay. An information literacy test. Depending on how you assess Gen Ed could also be assessed at the institutional level, depending on how you assess it. All right. But in SAC's eyes, and I know you all are SAC's accredited, Gen Ed is actually considered a program. Okay? So Gen Ed is a program. And the program assessment focuses on how well the students are meeting those outcomes at the program level. The course assessment is how well a course is meeting those student learning outcomes at the program level, and then also the course objectives, right? And then you have your classroom assessment, which is the actual individualized performance of a student in your course. Okay, so 4 levels of assessment. The goal of assessment at all 4 levels is to improve, inform, prove, and support. Okay? Now, you've already talked about alignment before here, right? Okay. All 4 of these levels must be aligned. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going, right? You can't see the outcome. You can't see the end in sight. You have to be aligned from the classroom all the way up to the institution level. Okay?
Well, and
Yeah.
ideally, there would be multiple pathways of information loops.
Absolutely.
For that continuous improvement,
Mhm.
so that and it's close to lifetime as possible.
Yes. Yes, and we'll talk about the loop here in a few minutes. All right, so you have 4 levels of assessment. 3 types of assessment, okay? You have pre-assessment, what do students know right? At that early, as soon as they walk in the door and you admit them as a student, what do they know, right? Then you have midpoint, okay? Formative assessment. What are the students learning, right? This is ongoing, right, in your classroom, in the courses. What are they learning? That's midpoint. And then you have summative. So it's kind of the end point, the exit, right? It could be the exit of a course. It could be the exit of the gen ed program, or it could be the exit as they're getting the degree and they're walking out of your institution, okay? But it's what have they learned, okay? Ideally, you want to look at all three types when you're doing program assessment or university assessment, all right? At the very least, early and exit. Okay? That's what I encourage you. Exit is okay, you can do exit. But if you don't know where students are, how can you know where they're going to go? Right? The value of a program is to provide value to the student. So when they come in and you don't know where they're at, right, you can't really prove value of your degree program. Okay, so you've got to be able to prove that value added of your degree program. Okay, so early, midpoint, exit. So in your degree programs, your majors that you all are responsible for, which kind of method do you all tend to use? Anybody? Do any of you do all three? All of the above for the education? Education, right? Okay.
To our students as well.
Anybody else?
For the information literacy, we're going to do pre-assessment at Midway 101 and try to get summative in the capstone
Okay, fantastic.
to show the growth.
Okay, I can tell you that some graduate programs, I know you all have a few here, some graduate programs, they seem to only focus on exit, whether it be a thesis or whether it be a dissertation or what have you, but all they want to know is that final product. I have seen that. That's very common in graduate programs. Anyone else want to share? Okay. So assessment is not evaluation. How many times have y'all heard that? Have y'all heard that? You all have heard it before? Okay. So assessment is supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to be ongoing. It's supposed to be positive, right? You're looking at individualized performance of learning. You're providing feedback to the students, ongoing feedback, right? Evaluation is much more negative. It can be seen as judgmental, right? And it actually shows the gaps or the shortfalls of what you're actually looking at. So they're not the same thing. However, they both have to have criteria for you to assess or evaluate, right? Both are used to make evidence-based decisions, okay? And they actually have to have measures, all right? But they're not the same. We don't want you to think of them as the same. So why student learning assessment? Why student learning assessment? Anybody?
Could you just, like, on that phrase, kind of go a little more depth about what you're asking?
For faculty, why is student learning assessment important?
Well, I mean, it's to find out where they are within the program, right? Or what they understand or what they don't understand becomes clearer by doing, you know, for me, like when you talk about formative assessments, where it's like a blackboard discussion or things of that nature, and that's an early chance to kind of correct any kind of misunderstanding.
So it gives you an opportunity to look at the gaps of what students are, what you may have to teach and reteach, right, in order for them to get the concept that you want them to know.
Also adjusting yourself as a teacher, as an instructor, on your approaches, our methodology,
Right.
about how you're teaching your content.
Fantastic. What are some external drivers? Why do we have to do student learning assessment?
No, that's not the thing.
In our case, and we have to know that our teachers have the skills, the knowledge, and the disposition to teach babies, to teach
Right.
the next generation.
Well, and to meet standards.
Yes, to meet the Kentucky teacher standards, right? And to meet your CAPE accreditation standards, right? So external drivers are those things such as regional accreditation, so you all have SACs. When is your all's next SACs visit?
Oh, like 8 years now.
Oh, okay, so you all just went through it? Okay. All right, and so your fifth year interim report's due in 3 years?
Yeah, is that right?
We progressed that. Specialized accreditation, so for example, the nursing accreditor, right? And then for public institutions, you have the state coordinating board. So that would be the CPE, right, in our statewide strategic agenda, right? Internal drivers is simply just good management, right? It's good management of the learning that is occurring at your institution, right? It's quality motivation. It's motivating for faculty to get together and have those robust discussions about learning, right? It's a good motivator for students. They know exactly what they're going to learn when they come into your programs, right? It's knowing where you are, where you've been, and where they're going to go, right? So the importance of assessment in faculty. And we mentioned here a minute ago to improve teaching, to identify those gaps, right? Discover what's missing, to figure out our students learning what they're supposed to be learning, right? What did I miss as an instructor, right? What did I not, discuss that I thought I did, but students just didn't get it, right? And then finding out the student needs. What are those student needs? Right? For students, it's a way for them to understand the value of the program itself. Again, it's a commitment to the students. Again, when a student enters your university, you're making a promise to them, right, that you as faculty are going to uphold, the institution is going to uphold. It's confidence in course sequence as well. It gives them an idea of what courses they have to take in order to get in and get out in a timely fashion, right? We don't want them taking extra courses that they don't need, right? It provides an opportunity for transparency. We need to be very transparent to our students. Assessment, student learning, and going to college, it's not a secret, right? We need to be very transparent. If you come to our institution, we can promise you X, Y, and Z. If you take our degree program and you major in our discipline, we will promise you, you will learn, right? And you will be able to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, we are making a promise. We are going to be very transparent. It lets students see their strengths and weaknesses. They can take charge of their own learning. If you're transparent with them, they can, right? If you're not transparent, they can't take charge of their own learning, right? Because it's a secret, and it shouldn't be a secret. Better information about what is being asked of them. Grading can be less arbitrary. If you really look at assessment, we'll talk about rubrics here in a little while. Have you already talked about rubrics? Have you all had that session yet? Huh? Then it helps the professor teach better. Okay? And ask questions as we go along the way, because I want this to be a two-way communication. So the importance of assessment in the institution. Okay, we talked a little bit about this, but it's the ability to help recruit students. Again, it's that promise that you all made to them, the continuous improvement, making evidence-based decisions. You're not going to create a new program or shut a program down or completely revise your curriculum, right, if you don't have any evidence to back up why you're doing what you're doing, right?
Or shouldn't, yeah.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe you have courses that have been here for, 30 years because you had an expert, you had a faculty that was an expert in a certain area, right? And they wanted to teach that class. But, you really don't have a student learning outcome in the program that has anything to do with the topic in that course. It was just there because that's what the faculty knew, right? So it shouldn't be there, right? So evidence-based decisions, right? Keep courses, change courses, revise courses, get rid of courses. Evidence-based decisions. Accountability, or accreditation. If you're not accredited, you lose all federal funding. That's pretty important, right? Without federal funding, you won't have any students. Without students, you won't have jobs, right? Accountability, consistency. We talked about consistency a little bit ago. And then transparency again to the institution. Okay. So the assessment checklist, intentional planning is assessment done right. Okay, so be very intentional with what you're doing, right? So who are you assessing? What are you assessing? What do you really want to know? Why does it matter? Why are you assessing something that doesn't matter? So think about what matters to you, what matters to your program, to your courses, to your students, okay? Assess what matters. What type of data are you actually collecting? All right? Don't assess to just assess, right? Don't be collecting all this data. I'm a firm believer that less is better, right? But it needs to be of high quality and it needs to be very intentional, okay? If you're not going to, yes.
We have students coming to the table where public schools are actually assessing them for a test. So their thinking is narrow. And they really don't have critical thinking because they've had this constant flow of the specific information that is on the test, how it's supposed to be delivered. And so when they come to college and then we are trying to do the right thing by assessment, then we're having to go back and reteach a lot of things.
And that's because the public school systems are, if you all are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, they're having the students remember, right, and memorize. It's the very low level, the very bottom of Bloom's taxonomy.
Force them up to the top.
Yeah, and getting them up to the top to where they are critically analyzing or creating or implementing or being innovative. It's hard. It's hard to do, but that's our job, right? That's our job. So we've got to get them there. Again, and that's the promise that the institution has made when you accept that student, right? And that's something you all need to know. And that's why the entry assessment is important, because you need to know what students know and what they don't know, right? And that's tough. It's tough when students have, I mean, my daughter's in high school. So, I have to talk to her about these types of things. But you're right. It's a lot of remembering and memorization, right, in order to pass that test and to get that A, right? Because that's what students want. They want an A. Okay, so think about what assessable assignments that you're using in your courses or that you can use for program level assessment, right, that really address and align to the student learning outcome. Okay? Again, everything has to be aligned, even down to the assignment that you're actually having the student do. If you're having them do an assignment in your course that doesn't directly align to the course outcome, right, to the program outcome or the institution outcome, then you shouldn't be doing it. All right? So think about that. Everything should be directly aligned. So think about, again, intentionally when you're assessing your programs, who's going to collect the data, where is the data going to be collected exactly, pinpoint it down, right? Think about the logical courses that make the most sense to collect assessment data, especially for the program level, right? You don't have to assess every course all the time, every semester, to get program student learning assessment data, right? Be logical. Think about where it fits best. When will it be collected? Who will see the result? And then how will the data be used? Right? It's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. You all do this great, don't you? Yeah? They do. Question?
One of the things I found coming in as a new person in the institution was struggling with where data had been stored. So that institutional memory, when you have to turnover, I think becomes a really critical piece of this. Because you can gather it, but if it's not stored someplace where you can access it, and future generations can access it, it's kind of...
You have to start over. Again, it's not, and I would say that the program wasn't very intentional, right, with the planning and the process and putting things. How many of you all have assessment plans for your programs? Some of you do? Okay. Okay, so I encourage you, if you don't, for every single degree program, create an assessment plan. All right, it's the intentional planning. Create it so that it lasts through your next program review. How often do you have program review? Every 5, 7, 10 years? What?
and this process is kind of getting, introduced, the program review and assessment piece is getting introduced this academic year.
Okay, so you've done program review before.
They have, but I think they're evaluating or assessing the assessment process
Okay,
and tweaking it to
Okay.
make it a little bit, in my opinion, more up to date.
okay.
Like the way-
And how often is the
It'll be
plan?
five.
It'll be, okay, so every 5 years, right? So when you create an assessment plan, then I would encourage you to create it for 5 years, right? And so every 5 years when you go through the program review process, you're going to revisit your assessment, your student learning assessment plan, and then you're going to revise it as you revise your program review. Okay? But in that assessment plan, you should clearly detail, these are the student learning outcomes, these are the courses, these are how they are aligned, right? Who is going to collect the data? Who is responsible for collecting that data? Right? Is it all the faculty in every single course? Is there a course coordinator? Is there a chair? Is it, who is it? Is it going to be the administrative secretary, which I have seen before? Okay, collecting all that data? Who is it going to be? And then where is it going to go? Right? How is it going to be stored? Are you all going to create a program Dropbox with the data, whatever it is? Are you going to put it in Tableau, like whatever you all have? Are you going to use Google Drive, Google Docs, Excel, whatever it may be? Lay it out, right? So that people who come in after you decide to leave, right, know exactly where to look and what they're supposed to be doing and where they need to go to collect the data, right? I can tell you at the University of Kentucky, there's a lot of turnover, especially chairs. They do it for a year and we're done. Right? They just want to be a faculty member, right? They just want to be a faculty member. So every September, it was on my calendar. Every September, I would go in and I would say, we would do this, intro to assessment every semester, right? Or every fall semester. I would just automatically go in and do this for new chairs, for new faculty, because there is turnover. All right. So we have to consistently train faculty and administrators.
But I think too, within the 5 year span, you are doing checks along the way. Almost like a formative assessment, because you may need to make some adjustments.
Absolutely.
Before you get to the 5th year.
Yep.
So keeping that data will be important to the explanation for why things have changed.
Yes, absolutely. So you need to think about, assessing your assessment process, right? Yes. Yeah.
One of the ways we assess is for monthly faculty meetings, a component of the agenda, like one standard or one outcome.
Okay.
Every month.
Oh, fantastic. And so you all know exactly what you're going to talk about every month. It's on the agenda. That's great. Yeah.
Maybe another question, what are we going to do with that data? It's like an action.
Okay. So created action items.
What is the next?
And that's the continuous improvement model, right? Okay. So I encourage you all to create those assessment plans if you don't have them already. All right, and think long term. Just in case somebody leaves, they can pick it up right where you left off and know exactly who to reach out to, right? They know which courses are supposed to be up for assessment this semester, right? Because you don't have to assess everything all the time, right? But if you have a clear and very intentional 5-year plan or however long the plan is, right? And if you leave, somebody knows as soon as they walk in the door what's supposed to be assessed that semester, right? Do you all have semesters, terms, quarters? What do you all do? All kinds of things. All right, so very briefly, yes, and I'm going to go in more detail a little bit later, but the assessment process. So we talked about kind of the loop was mentioned earlier. So here's the loop. The first step is to provide opportunities for learning. Right? That's the first step. Provide those opportunities. Faculty need to come together. They need to come to a consensus on what those opportunities are and what those student learning outcomes are. Right? They need to create those outcomes. They need to create a map of their curriculum so that students know exactly what they're going to learn in every single course that they take. Right? And that faculty understand how courses are mapped to the outcomes, right? Describe your selected methods, step 2, right? Faculty will identify both direct and indirect methods of assessment. You need both to tell the story, right? Midway cannot do a good job at telling its story unless it uses both direct and indirect methods. Okay, and we'll talk about each of those methods here in a minute. Step three, gather the data. Develop a timeline for gathering the assessment. Remember, we talked about pre, entry, midpoint, exit. So think about that. Think about when you're going to collect all this fantastic assessment data, right, to make evidence-based decisions. Fourth step, evaluate and interpret that data. There's no point in collecting the data if you're not actually going to look at it. No point at all. You're wasting time, which somebody mentioned earlier. You're wasting resources. You're wasting students' time, right? If you're going to assess something, look at it, all right? Look at it together. Look at it as a faculty committee. Bring it together. Talk about it. What does it mean? Fifth step, plan improvements. Again, going back to action items. After you've collected the data, you've analyzed the data, you've interpreted the data together, right, as a faculty group, you're going to actually think about how you're going to plan for the better, right? Think about what those improvements are, okay? They could be changes to the curriculum, they could be changes to pedagogy, it could be adding a course, it could be taking out a course, it could be working with the library she left, the information literacy, perhaps you need to add something there, right? Perhaps you need to give students more lab time, right? Maybe they need a little bit more work in the lab and less lecture, so you're going to change some things around, right? Think about what those improvements could be, right, based on the data. And then the last step, or actually the last step to continue the process in a loop, right, is reflection. So reflect and have staff reflect on the strategies implemented to determine the impact, right? What was the impact? Reflect on what you've done, okay? And then what is the ultimate impact on the student, impact on the program, impact of the institution, right? So think about that. So this is kind of the continuous improvement cycle for assessment, all right? You may know of it as closing the loop, if y'all are familiar with that term. All right, so I'm going to jump really quick. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to jump really quick to accountability. Specifically SACS. I'm not going to go into detail here, but just for you all to know, and I don't know if this has been shared with you all, but this is effective January 2018. Some things have changed. Okay, 8.2 student achievement. Student outcomes both within the classroom and outside of the classroom are the heart of higher education experience. You can read the rest yourself. But finally, this is what SACS is looking at, that the institution identifies those outcomes, assesses the extent to which it achieves those outcomes, and provides evidence of seeking improvement based on analysis of the results in the areas below. Okay? And this is for educational programs, right? So each degree program, it is for general education program, and then it is for academic and student services that support student success, right? So SACS questions to consider. So think about all these things when you're writing that beautiful assessment plan that you all are going to create now, right, after this session. So here are just some questions. What is the faculty role? Think about the faculty role. Think about those oversight committees and assessment. Is there a common process, right? Is it systematic? Ongoing, you had mentioned earlier, right? What are those specific student learning outcomes? Where are they going to be measured? How are they going to be measured? What types of activities occur to determine whether the learning outcomes are met or not met? Where are those gaps, right? The results are analyzed, and the institution or your degree program is seeking improvements to make change. If you have reports, right? No action needed. We are awesome, right? It's all good, right? Okay, well, if that's the case, what are you doing next? Okay, you can't just stop there, right? You can't just stop there. Think about how you can move to the next level, okay? Do you all do annual reporting? Yes? Okay, yeah. Have you ever come across a report that said, we met our benchmark, no improvements needed? Yeah? Okay, that's not bad.
Well, Ellen had mentioned this like in one of her sessions the other day, and it's if you say no improvements are needed, you're not being really honest with yourself, just
Right.
because the context and the population of the learners is continually changing. So how do you adapt?
Right? Yeah. So think about that, okay? Think about that.
Like, I truly believe we are in a profession where we will continually strive for perfection, but never reach it. And as long as you know that going in, it's not heartbreaking. It's real.
Right.
I think it goes back to changing that focus between evaluation. When you think about
Yeah,
program
yeah.
review, it's not about evaluating the program. It is truly about assessment, which is part of learning.
Yes.
Or they should.
And assessment is not one size fits all, right? So what works for the School of Health Sciences may not work for the School of Arts and Sciences, may not work for business, right? Assessment is not one size fits all. Just because a degree program has 6 student learning outcomes and another degree program has 120 student learning outcomes, that's okay, right? We all don't have to do everything the same. I know.
It doesn't seem okay.
I mean, it doesn't seem okay, but it really is okay, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want a dentist getting in my, right? I don't want a dentist to do dental work on me if they don't know the 120 dental standards, right? So, right, okay, but there is not an assessment, it doesn't have to be one size fits all, so think about that going in.
Really, 120 dental students?
Yes.
But they're mostly on floss.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot. And they have to assess those every single year. So it's not like, yeah. So think about that. Assessment does not have to be one size fits all. Okay, think about what's best for your programs, right? What's best for your courses, what's best for your students, right? And how you can continually improve. If the institution, let's see what this would say, use sample, use sampling. You don't have to assess all students all the time, every semester. Sample. If you have a large enough course or large enough courses, sample. If you have a huge gen ed program, right? Maybe you may not want to assess, maybe you want to assess every single gen ed course every semester, but sample, right? And then keep those assignments or whatever you're pulling over time, okay? Sample. If you have a small class, 10 students, you may have to do all 10 students, but you also may have to do 2 or 3 semesters to get a larger sample size, right? You may not be able to assess something every single semester because the sample size is so low to begin with, right? So think about all those things that play a factor. But this is actually from the SACS handbook, right? So they are telling us what we need to consider going into this, okay? Last, multiple assessments, if so described. Indirect assessments, right? Assessment methods, so you need both. And then how's the institution use assessment results to improve the educational program? All right, we are not perfect. Our students are not perfect. I can promise you that, right? I'm not perfect. Assessment changes, student need changes, student demographics change, right? And we have to adapt, exactly what you said. We have to adapt, okay? So there's always a way to improve our programs, all right? So I don't know who looks at your annual student learning assessment reports. Ellen, who is it? Who looks at your all's annual student learning assessment reports? Anybody? Does anybody look at it? The dean? Okay.
Dean does he still do that?
Yes.
Or does that go to John Curtis? I don't know. You're obviously asking John Curtis.
Okay, so clarification and communication of the institution's assessment process on campus could help, right? But don't submit any reports anymore that say no improvements needed, right? Let's try to get away from that, right? Okay. So Kentucky accountability, and I'm just going to go into a little bit specifically about Kentucky accountability and CPE. I know that you're not a public institution, but I do want to share with you the state's kind of agenda moving forward, because it's very important for you all to know and understand where the state is going, okay? Very important. There are 3 core areas, themes that the statewide agenda is focused on. The first, right, is opportunity. How can Kentucky encourage more people to take advantage of our post-secondary opportunities? How can we do this as a state? All right, and you will definitely play a role in this. Okay, you all play a role in everything that the state does. Success. How can Kentucky increase degree and certificate completion, fill workforce shortages, and guide more graduates to a career path? Right? So once we've created those opportunities, how can we ensure that our students succeed? Right? And that is what you all, that's what we need you all to do. So the state is very dependent on our faculty, right? Because without you, students can't succeed. The next is impact. All right, what kind of impact can we do? How can Kentucky's post-secondary education system create economic growth and development to make our state more prosperous? All right, so those are the 3 areas that the Kentucky statewide agenda is focused on. We are now at a performance-based funding model, exciting to institutions, public institutions, I know. I'm just kidding, they're not very excited about it. But I will tell you that there is some talk moving forward that outcomes. So right now it's more of those indirect retention rates, graduation rates. There is talk about student learning outcomes becoming a part of the performance funding. And are our students actually able to do what we have promised to them that they can do, right?
And that last piece there, the orange and orange,
Yeah.
has fundamentally shaken up some of the basic assumptions about who can complete higher ed, because it's always been sort of predicated on the notion that you will get at the best a 40% completion rate if you're
Mm-hmm.
so thinking differently about how you reach all students,
Right.
and thinking differently about the fact that it is the institution's responsibility
It is.
to retain students is fundamentally different than the way many of us were socialized into doing higher ed.
How many of you all in here actually look at demographic? How many of you all actually look at demographic data when you're looking at your student learning outcome data?
Oh, we have to.
But that's the education.
We have to.
If they are governed by an accreditation board, and then that it's when you kind of your gen.
But I would encourage all programs, when you look at this data, think about demographics.
I
Right.
think that's really important.
Very important. Okay.
Well, and you also have to think about a need. Like a lot of our students are non-visual. So some are coming into a second career.
Right.
They're first generation college goers.
Right, and so looking at all of that and the barriers that come with some of that and having to give support. in a
Absolutely.
different way.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. In some of my courses, it's very challenging. Some of the students come back and they're non-traditional, veterans, right, out of the military. Very, very experts in their area, absolutely. But sometimes they don't write as well, right? And so we really have to practice, how to write professionally, right? So yes, we have to think about the types of students that we're bringing into our institutions and how we can meet their needs individually, right? Yes. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about where the Kentucky is going. Specifically, what I think relates to kind of teaching and learning and key to faculty involvement is the success one. Okay, I know we're all responsible for opportunity and impact, but success is really where the focus is for faculty. So objective 8, and this is in our strategic agenda, promote academic excellence through improvements in teaching and learning. And then you'll see here that these are the state's objectives. Okay, so use authentic assessments to inform pedagogy, right? Curriculum, assignment design, provide pedagogical training and professional development opportunities. And we have done that. Ellen mentioned earlier that the CPE, so what I did when I came there is we created work groups at the state level. We brought together the assessment directors in one group, and we brought the general education curriculum folks in a second group, and then we brought the directors of the teaching and learning centers in a third group. And we would meet every other month or quarterly at least to talk about what's going on in the state. And it gives us a way to share best practice across institutions, both public and private. Okay. Promoting academic quality. Oh, I will say for two, the training part, we held an assignment design workshop. Did any of you all go to the assignment design workshop held in January? No? I believe Ellen was there, I think. But there was an assignment design, a statewide assignment design workshop in January. And so that was pretty exciting to do that. We're also, look, I'm talking like I'm still at CPE and I'm not. But there's a diversity workshop actually coming up in August. And I'll make sure, hopefully Ellen has shared that with you. Would love to have, see a large group attending that diversity workshop. I'm talking about equity. They're actually bringing in Dr. Tia McNair from AACNU to lead that workshop, and they're actually hosting 2 workshops. One in, I think, Frankfurt, and the other in like Western Kentucky. So 2 opportunities, but I'll make sure you all get that information. So promoting academic quality and continuous improvement, right? And that's, we review every single degree program for public institutions. Right? That was kind of my role at the state, right? Every single degree program from all public institutions, 4-year and 2-year, would come into my office. On average, I reviewed about 300 degree programs every year. All right. So the state is doing a lot of things. I mean, it is required for those public degree programs to actually submit that information. We are a LEAP state. How many of y'all knew that Kentucky was a LEAP state? Some of you? All right. So if y'all are familiar with AACNU, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, okay? They have this LEAP initiative. It's Liberal Education in America's Promise. And it's, again, promising liberal arts to our students. Y'all are a liberal arts university. We are a LEAP state. So think about some of those LEAP activities. There's tons of information on LEAP and the activities that it promotes. And lastly, recognize established strengths of institutions and encourage differentiated post-secondary system. Each of our public institutions has its own governing board, right? But we really try to work in a way where we can work together. CPE is just a coordinating board. It's not a governing board, right? So each public institution has its own governing board. We're there to support, and we're there to bring those institutions together. So future of Kentucky and kind of where it's going in the future, a big focus on academic quality, okay? We are very heavily involved in the multi-state collaborative. It's an effort between SHIO and AACNU that actually looks at critical thinking, written communication, and quantitative literacy. We have 3 institutions down here, NKU, UK, and BCTC. And we actually, what they do is they collect student work, student assignments, papers that the students have actually done, and we submit them to the national level for scoring. All right, and then faculty get that data back on their students. All right. We also this past year created the Kentucky Consortium so that private institutions could participate. I meant to look it up to see if there was any faculty from Midway, but I can't remember. I'd have to look it up separately, but any faculty member could have participated if they wanted to send me assignments of their students, and I could send them up to the national level for scoring, and they would be scored by other faculty at other institutions, and then you would get your data back. They were scored against the value rubrics. You all familiar with the value rubrics? No? Okay, I have to come back into a separate section, a separate workshop on that value rubrics. But anyway, Kentucky core categories. These are gen ed outcomes, right? We do have statewide general education outcomes that every public institution has to assess, okay? They have to have an assessment plan. They have to assess these gen ed outcomes, and they have to send those data and assessment reports to us at the state level, okay? Moving forward, the goal, right now, institutions are kind of doing whatever they want to do. They're doing their own thing. In the future, we would love to have the institutions look at the value rubric so that we're kind of all on the same page. Right now, we're just kind of all over the place doing our own thing, which is okay, but it doesn't give Kentucky, it doesn't give Kentucky enough information to really see if our students are competent in these general education areas. Yes.
Just so I'm clear, when you say the value rubric, is it like a common language, common rubric?
It's a common rubric that many, I would say thousands and thousands of institutions use across the nation. Yes. And they have about 16 rubrics. These are the kind of the common ones, right? They have some for teamwork, for integrated learning. oral communication. They have tons of different rubrics. So if you're, thinking about creating a rubric, I wouldn't start from scratch because there are tons out there that are nationally known. So I would say start with those and then tweak as you see fit, right? Tweak as needed. Okay. So this is just kind of what's going on in Kentucky because I think it is very relevant for you all. All right. So we're going to get back to the fundamentals of student learning assessment in our, I really only have 15 minutes left. Okay, we're going to go fast. Okay. So fast. Opportunities for learning. So remember I showed you the assessment process, the continuous improvement cycle. So now I'm going to try to break these up individually for you, okay? So the first one is provide opportunities for learning. So think about what are those program student learning outcomes, right? You need to use clear and specific measurable terms. So I hope you all are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, right? Mapping the curriculum. How many of you all have a curriculum map? Okay, not many. Map your curriculum. It will help, I promise. It may be a tedious process at first, but I promise you if you take the time and you actually create a map, it will help you. All right, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. All right, Bloom's taxonomy, obviously, we talked about this a little bit earlier. We talked about, right, K-12, kind of focusing on those remembering and understanding. And then you kind of want to go up, right? You want to get to where students are analyzing and creating. Here's just some other options, right? So think about those action verbs that you can use instead of understand, right? It's hard to measure understanding, right? But if you're asking students to list or describe or compare or discuss, you're actually asking them to do something, right? You're actually asking them to perform something, right? So this is an example of a curriculum map, right? You have all your courses, or you might want to do it the opposite way if you have a lot of courses. This is probably a little backwards. But you want to put your courses in a matrix along with your outcomes. I'm going to ask you, what's wrong with this map? Does anybody see anything wrong with it? So the I, R, E, and A is the outcome is introduced to the student. R, the outcome is reinforced. And then you could emphasize the outcome, and then the student applies the outcome.
Look at outcome 4. You get to the outcome applied without introducing or reinforcing or emphasizing.
Right.
And outcome 2, you don't actually apply it.
Right. So if you all sit down and created a curriculum map, you may see something like this, right? Then you're going to figure out what the gaps are in your curriculum, right? Because I will tell you, outcome 4, if you have a program student learning outcome at the program level, it should be important enough that the student is learning it more than once, right? More than once. And you're asking the students to apply something that they never learned, right? That's not fair. But you don't really know that this is going on until you actually sit down and map your curriculum and outcomes together. Yes.
My former institution, it came down to teaching lesson planning, and lesson planning came so late in the program. The kids were just, it was like taking a sip of water from a fire hose. They were so overwhelmed that, those gaps existed early on.
Yeah. So think about creating and developing those curriculum maps for your degree programs. It is quite insightful. It really is. And you'll find those courses that have been taught for years, right? And it doesn't even have an outcome related to it. You'll find courses, right, that go across the top where nothing. Like the outcome isn't introduced, reinforced, emphasized, nothing in that course. Why do you have the course, right? You don't need a course if you're not teaching the student one of the program student learning outcomes. Okay. All right, we talked about describing the selected methods, direct versus indirect. So direct measures are the student's performance of learning, right? Their actual performance. What are they doing? Okay. Indirect is a proxy for student learning, right? You're asking the students to reflect on what they've learned, or you're going to ask them, how many of you all heard, If you ask a student to write well, what are they going to say? You know, if you say, do you write well? Yeah, of course I do. I'm the best writer. I'm the best writer there is, right? And then you look at their paper, their, 6-page essay, and they're an awful writer, right?
He may say, I write good.
I write good, yes. Yeah. I'm a writing good. And we're going to do assessment done right. Right? So indirect is a proxy. Indirect is a proxy for student learning. So example of direct methods. And I kind of broke this out by course and program. Okay. So course, you could do minute papers, case studies, essays, pre-post testing, student presentations, discussion board posting, portfolios, papers, all this great stuff in the course. At the program level, you could kind of almost do the same thing, right? You may look at sampling, case studies or sampling research papers or looking at a research or a thesis or whatever you're doing. Maybe it's a reflective essay. So these are some examples of direct methods. Indirect methods. All right, here are some examples of course indirect methods. Peer reviews, surveys, grades are an indirect measure of student learning. Okay? It is not a direct measure. Program indirect measures, surveys, focus groups, interviews, retention and graduation rates is a good indirect measure. Job placement rates is a good indirect measure. So when you're looking at assessment data for your degree programs, you want to look at both direct and indirect, okay? Because you need the whole story, right? You need to know if students can write and write well. You also need to know if they've been placed in a job, right? So aligning assessment methods, and I just want to give you an example because we talked a lot about the importance of alignment. So here's an example of a program student learning outcome. Write clear and effective prose in several forms using conventions appropriate to audience, including academic audiences, purpose, and genre. All right, so that's the program student learning outcome. So for my course, I have to create an outcome that aligns to the program outcome, right? So as a course, as a faculty course developer of my course, I have to create an outcome. Students will describe the history, role, and purpose of legal aspects in higher education, right? So for me, this outcome aligns to the program outcome, all right? So the next step is to create those assessment methods. So what are those assessments that I'm doing in my course, right? I want to do 3 assessments. The first, I'm going to do a skill demonstration where I'm going to ask the students to complete through writing and using critical thinking skills, the elements of reasoning for chapters 1 and 2, all right? They have to write something. Discussion board, that's the second assessment measure that I'm going to use. Students will write a response to the discussion board question posed by the instructor. The third assessment is an essay. And you can kind of see where I've kind of hit, entry, midpoint, exit, right? Students will write a 4- to 6-page essay on a legal aspect topic in higher education. All right, so making sure that those assessment methods align to the course outcome and the course outcome aligns to the program outcome. And then ideally, your program, well not ideally, it should, align to your gen ed outcome, right? To some extent, okay? Assessment tools. How many of you all use grading checklists? Scoring guides, rubrics. How many know the difference between the 3? Kind of, sort of. Okay. So grading checklist is one that provides criteria, but there isn't any scale or performance indicator, right? It's just, here's the criteria of the rubric. Here are the points possible. Here are the points you got, right? That's a checklist. Scoring guide. It's a little bit better than a checklist, but still not great because the student actually has no idea what a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 means, right? So if you're scoring a student on each of these criteria, you're giving them a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, the student's going to come back and say, well, what does a 2 mean? Like, Joe next to me got a 4 and I got a 3. What's going on here? Why? What's the difference? All right, there's no performance indicators, okay? So again, it's better than a checklist, but it's not the best way to be transparent to students, okay? The next, rubrics. We talked about rubrics as a third option. They're much more objective. They're very transparent. It actually helps you grade faster, believe it or not. They may take longer to create or not if you use the AAC and rubrics that are already created for you, right? But it's actually going to help you decrease time spent on grading. It also helps you with consistency across sections, right? Because the faculty are using the same rubric for the same course. Yes?
We were having a discussion the other day about when you have a course that does not have rubrics for major or primary assessments, and sometimes I'm a believer of rubrics do take time, like assessments take time to do well, and therefore, student guide or a grading checklist in the beginning, you don't have anything other than.
It's better than
It's a
nothing.
place to
Yes,
start.
absolutely, absolutely.
As you develop it, then you can get better. Because a bad rubric, just because you developed it quickly.
Absolutely.
Crappy rubric, to me, is not.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. A checklist is better than nothing, but have something. Yes. Rubric is best standard, okay, best practice. But yes, it's better to have something than nothing. So please, yes.
I'm going to do a sick little commercial plug here. The next Moodle training this afternoon is on rubrics.
And we've had to provide evidence for our accreditation that we're establishing interpretive reliability across instructors. So for instance, with our discussion posting exam, we have clear criteria for for, and then we do the training every semester.
Okay,
To establish
fantastic.
agreements.
Yeah.
We have to.
Yeah. Well, how many of you all here, as a faculty member and instructor, how many of y'all have like a class of 20 students or more? Anybody? Yeah, or more, 50, okay? So do you, if you don't have a rubric, can you promise that you're grading, right, grading the first student the exact same way you're grading number 50th? You can't, right? Rubrics help fix that problem, all right? So think about consistency and fairness across all students, right? Okay, I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I have like 3 minutes. This is what the written communication rubric looks like, okay? This is written communication, and you'll notice that the program example that I shared with you all earlier, the program outcome when I was talking about alignment, these are the criteria, right? So the program outcome was written in a way that picks topics of the criteria in the rubric that's actually being used to assess the student work, right? And assignment design is a whole nother thing. This is an example of kind of, we talked about assessment plan and being very transparent about what's being collected, when it's being collected. So this is just an example. Perhaps we have a 3-year assessment plan. In year 1, we're assessing oral communication and written communication. These are our data points, direct, right? This is direct data point 1, sample of oral presentations gathered every semester using the oral communication value rubric. Indirectly, we're going to look at student perception survey for all students every year, right? So think about what is that direct method of assessment, and then what is the indirect method of assessment, okay? And you can have more than one, but you at least need one of each, okay? Data, and I really want to hit this point home, so I am going to talk about this. Look at this. If you get data back, and this is what it shows, perhaps you've used a rubric, you pull this sample of student papers, right? This is the student data that you get back. All right, what does this mean? Think about what it means. So this is the rubric score on a scale from 0 to 3.5. This is the rubric scores, right? This is the criteria that the student was scored on, okay? So when you see data, right, think about what does it mean? How could you respond? What other questions are there? Okay? So looking at that data, and we'll talk about that data in a minute, over the last 2 years, okay, think about what are those planning improvements after you've looked at that data, okay? So over the last 2 years, the rubric scores related to sources of evidence is moving in a downward trend. So let's go back. So this is one example. So over the past 2 years, sources and evidence is going down, right? In year 2, the students scored on a little under a 2, Okay, sources and evidence, it keeps going down. They're closer to 1.5, right? What does that mean? Right? So think about what that means. Okay, it keeps moving down. So possibly a plan for improvement could be English 101 and English 102 will be revised so that an information literacy assignment is added to the curriculum, right? Another plan for improvement could be that the Teaching and Learning Center, in collaboration with the Director of the Library Services, right, will host professional development opportunities on how to create information literacy type assignments, right? All right, now you're going to reflect. All right, so here's the data, right? You have the first 2 years. Now you have the third year data in that, okay? Sources and evidence, year 2, year 3, year 1 of your assessment cycle, right? It's gone up, right? You're reflecting on the improvement actions and plans that you said you were going to take. So the first thing is instructors teaching English 101 and 102 attended a workshop on creating information literacy assignments in the summer of 2016. 73% of instructors teaching English 101 and 102 added the information literacy assignment to their curriculum. The data from the 16-17 assessment period indicates that the strategies implemented are working. Further, we will continue to monitor, right? I'm not saying that we've met our benchmark, we're good, we've increased, no improvements needed, am I? Right? We will continue to monitor this particular criteria further. We will reach out to those instructors that have not implemented an information literacy assignment and reach out to them, right? While reflecting on current data and the impact, we realize that we have not broken out the data by demographics or by campus versus online students. So perhaps moving forward, we're going to work on disaggregating that data, right? We're going to disaggregate that same chart by online students and traditional students, and then we're also going to disaggregate it by demographics. All right, so think about how you continuously improve even though you've met your benchmark, okay? Learning, it's what students know, which is content knowledge, but it's also what students can do with what they know, which is performance. There's 2 definitions to learning, all right? If you do one, if you only look at content knowledge, you're not looking at the whole picture of learning, okay? If you look at performance, you're looking at both. Align, integrate, continuously improve, okay? By failing to plan, you plan to fail, all right? Think about what your vision is, how you're going to engage faculty, how are you going to engage students, what is the impact, what do you want students to learn and be able to do, and then how are you going to change, all right? Thank you.